technology purposes. But I want to introduce probably my favorite name to pronounce in all of the YLC, which is Giovanni Dimaggio, who is going to do a presentation on the Immigrant Outreach Program that he puts on. And he's going to introduce himself, just like kind of close the loop on that, and present his very interesting and worthwhile project. Giovanni.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Giovanni Dimaggio. I moved from Arlington into DC, actually. I'm a judicial law clerk at a federal district court until next fall. And as the screen says, I'm co-chair of the Immigrant Outreach Committee. I think this is my 4th year in that role. I can't believe it's gone on that long. So, I mean, I've really enjoyed it. So today I will be presenting briefly on planning a successful CLE based on my experience with the Immigrant Outreach Committee over the last couple of years. I'll touch on some projects over the course of that presentation that we've done. My understanding is later I'll be sharing a new project idea for this upcoming bar year when we have our breakout session. So without further ado, we'll go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the purpose of this presentation, as I said, is just to share with you a couple of what I believe to be the keys to planning a successful CLE, or rather through brainstorming, preparing for, and executing a successful CLE. I do want to mention up front that while my presentation will primarily track the approach to a CLE, much of what I'll talk about will translate to organizing other events as well, with perhaps the most notable difference being that if you're not planning a CLE, you don't need to apply for CLE course approval. So on to the next slide. Just to frame everything first, you might be asking, why put on an event? Why am I doing this? There's some obvious answers, and well, hopefully all of them are obvious, but there's at least 2 obvious answers, and then a third maybe not so obvious. For the benefit of Virginia attorneys, it's of course an obvious answer, educating the bar. For the benefit of the public is probably another obvious answer. You can do that indirectly by promoting pro bono work through a CLE course, or you can do that directly by providing a service directly to the public if you're putting on more of a project that's going to provide some kind of direct legal service. The third, perhaps not always obvious, is it's also for your benefit. This has the potential to be a very fulfilling, fun way to volunteer your time to the bar and the community. It's an opportunity to build management skills, leadership skills, public speaking skills, event planning skills. It's an opportunity to network with your peers as well as experienced attorneys in a given practice area. And all of this obviously can be very helpful for you in your professional life, both inside and outside the YLC. So just to frame for you kind of, this is why you should be doing this, among other reasons. Next slide. So first we're going to talk about brainstorming a CLE and give you a couple of guiding tips there. The key, I think, is obviously figuring out your objectives and the scope of the event. You would definitely want to take a look at the Program Chair's Handbook that you were all handed a copy of today. I believe Section 1 has descriptions of the program and various programs and committees, and that's a good place to start looking to see kind of what is your mission. Do you have a broad mission, a specific mission? Both can be kind of a double-edged sword depending on whether you're someone who likes the confinement of the narrow scope or would prefer to be creative and kind of have freedom to do whatever you want. As for the Immigrant Outreach Committee, we have kind of the best of both worlds. We have 2 objectives primarily, which is 1, educating Virginia attorneys on the immigration consequences of criminal convictions. So for that, we pretty much do the same thing every time. We put on a CLE at least once a year on that exact topic. We also have a broader second objective, which is to reach out to Northern Virginia's immigrant population, and that allows us a lot of creativity for putting together projects. Last year, we launched a pro bono CLE series aimed at fostering and increasing pro bono participation in the area of immigration law in Virginia, and we had a terrific panel of presenters come up from the ABA Commission on Immigration, some nonprofit legal service providers like Human Rights First and CARE Coalition, I think. And we also collaborated with the Access to Legal Services Committee of the Virginia State Bar, and they put on a segment on the justice gap in Virginia. So that was just made from whole cloth. Again, using some creative license and running with that second broad objective. So you would look at your kind of mission statement or your role, respectively, as either a circuit rep or a program chair, and figure out kind of if you can get any guidance from that. Ask yourself whether your objectives have been fulfilled in the past. It can be very helpful, as Maureen was alluding to earlier, to get some templates from prior CLEs. If you can talk to your predecessors, whoever was a program chair or circuit rep before you, if you know who that is. And of course, you can always talk to your board liaison. There's a lot of institutional knowledge and advice on tap through them. Ask yourself, is there a current need? If you're working off of a template, that question might be as simple as figuring out the answer to how long has it been since the CLE was last run. You don't want them to be kind of stacked on top of each other because people will not be interested in coming. They've already done it recently. If you're coming up with a new idea, you might draw on your personal experience within a particular practice area. You might set up a phone call or coffee or lunch with experienced attorneys in a relevant practice area to get a better sense of what might be useful and perhaps cultivate a few contacts. That worked out to be terrific for planning the pro bono CLE series I mentioned. I met for coffee with the ABA Commission on Immigration director, and she just exploded with contacts and information and people. You should talk to her, talk to him. And then when you go and talk to those people, having been referred from an authority, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. Next thing you know, you have a whole roster lined up for a CLE. So that can sometimes be very fruitful. You want to always consider the potential for collaboration across circuit reps or programs. So do ask yourself if another YLC or Virginia State Bar program or committee has done something like this before or has a similar mission that overlaps with this objective. As I mentioned earlier, there was quite a bit of collaboration for the pro bono CLE series the Immigrant Outreach Committee put on last year. So there's always the potential for collaboration, and whenever you can do that, it's always a win-win for everybody involved. Ask yourself who your target audience is. All attorneys in Virginia, specific attorneys in a particular practice area, what levels of experience? Are you aiming for someone who has experience already? Are you aiming for people who've never done this before or something in between? This is going to be especially important to know when planning the content of the CLE. Who are your intended beneficiaries? Is this solely for the benefit of attorneys, or are you trying to reach a particular population? Of course, budget is always a good thing to keep your eye on. I think tab 5 of the YLC Program Chair's Handbook has a breakdown of this year's budgets by program. So that's something to keep your eye on, and talk to your YLC board liaison about what you guys have in terms of funding. And also you might keep in mind too whether if you're running a CLE, you'll be charging a registration fee, for example, because that can offset some of your costs. And then location. Again, look to your predecessors, look to the YLC's board liaison, the YLC board liaison that's been assigned to you. Maureen and Catherine have a wealth of information about potential locations. You can always ping them for some advice or put you in touch with some of their contacts. And then you would want to contact your YLC board liaison to request approval once you've got the whole project framed and you're ready to go. Again, in the handbook, there's, I think, tab 2. I'm working off of last year's tab, so if the tab's changed a little, forgive me. But somewhere in there's a very helpful project planning worksheet that will help you frame the contours of your project proposal. It doesn't have to be overly formalistic, but that'll be some good guidance for you as you prepare to communicate your proposal to your YLC board liaison. So next slide, preparing for the CLE. Tab 2 of the handbook has a suggested schedule for planning a CLE, or at least it did last year. It's a good guide. I'm going to go over a lot of that right now and with some tweaks. But with your objective and scope in hand, the very first thing you want to do is set your date and your venue, and that's when the rubber hits the road. That's when now you actually have a place to go and a time to go there, and you can actually tell prospective presenters this is the date we're looking for, and really start moving the ball forward. The handbook recommends, I think, 3 months out to set a date and kind of get the ball rolling. I think that's a terrific recommendation. That's worked really well for me in the past. and when you contact your venue, you will want to have some things in mind already for them, like the dates that you would like, obviously, your anticipated numbers. They're going to want to know if you have audio, video requirements, how many tables and chairs you'll need for things, whether your speakers will need parking passes, and they may charge a fee. Again, look to your budget, see if that works with what you have at your disposal. You're going to want to secure your CLE faculty. Again, the handbook recommends 3 months out. That's a good guideline. At that point, that's when you're going to pitch your CLE. You're going to basically introduce yourself, outline your program, the objective and scope of the course. Definitely explain to them when the course materials are going to be due into you, because it'll be your responsibility to forward those into the bar for CLE course approval. And be sure you know what you're asking of them when you approach them. It's one piece of advice that I'd like to give. Because I remember the first couple of times I reached out to people, they just were like, yeah, I'm on board. What do you need from me? And I sat there and I was like, good question, just a second. Oh, okay, I guess this is what I need from you. I need a CLE presentation, a PowerPoint presentation if you like. I need written materials, those are required for Virginia State Bar CLEs. And I needed to explain, the scope of the CLE, the target audience, because this was all things that they needed to know when they were preparing the presentations. So be sure to have that on hand when you're reaching out. You would then apply for CLE course approval. The handbook says apply for CLE course approval 3 months in advance. I will say that while that would be phenomenal, in my experience, it can be really difficult to get them in that far in advance, just because your presenters typically are not going to be gung-ho about getting their materials ready 3 months in front of the presentation. Orders do not work that far in advance. I think most of you will know. But something like a good 2 months out, certainly no more than a month out, but I think closer to 2 months out is something more reasonable to shoot for if you just contacted them at the 3-month mark. Giving them about a month to do the presentations is a little more achievable. So don't panic if you can't do that in the 3-month mark. You're going to want to establish your registration procedures. That would include setting the date, time, location, event description, agenda, speaker biographies, things like that, telling them where they need to mail in their registration forms and checks, which are the only acceptable form of payment by the Virginia State Bar. So it has to be a check. Make sure you make that clear. You'll want to develop an advertising plan. Chris Fortier is the man for that. He can really guide you through a full-blown advertising plan that is going to cover every single social media platform you can think of. We have Facebook, we have Google+, we have LinkedIn, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have Pinterest even, I think. I'm not sure how that even works, but we have social media presence everywhere. So with Chris's help, you can put together a fantastic social media plan that will really pump out the message and get everybody interested and excited about the project. Maureen and Catherine, too, are happy to help with email blasts, as she mentioned earlier, which are a very effective way of advertising your CLE. Finally, or not finally, but you want to keep everyone in the loop. Make sure you're organized and clear in your emails to presenters, for example. You want to welcome them. Once you've wrangled them all together, you want to welcome kind of the class or the faculty for the CLE. Make sure you set out and demarcate clearly, the various deadlines by which you'll need them to send you things, biographies, course materials, and so on. Registrants, you want to stay on top of notifying everybody, look, I've received your registration form, I got your check, don't worry, that's in safe hands. It may take a little bit of time to cash, depending on when you're going to forward the checks to the Virginia State Bar, which will be your responsibility to do. They appreciate that heads up. Otherwise, your inbox is flooded with emails about, did you get my check? Did you get my form? So being proactive about communicating to the faculty and registrants is a good tip. So is also keeping in touch with the venue, making sure they're on top of whatever needs you've suggested you need for audiovisual tables, so on and so forth. Don't forget to place your catering order. And don't forget to prepare your day of materials, things like name placards and things like that. And generally, key takeaway, stay organized. With the faculty, the registrants, the venue, the vendors, very, very important to stay organized, because on the next slide, you will see sometimes, notwithstanding the fact that you planned a spring, S-P-R-I-N-G, flowers, butterflies, sun, CLE, the weather will just decide it's going to be a winter CLE. And this happened to me with my last CLE. Maureen can empathize, because I was emailing her like crazy. I think the day before the CLE, we kind of did that chicken game where it's the storm coming and the forecasts and everything, and I'm on the other end, and I'm like, no, I'm not backing down. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. And then it happened. So when this happens, if this happens to you, I hope it never does. If you go to the next slide.
I like how this slide matches your shirt and tie.
Oh yeah, I dressed according to that slide. You should, if you're organized, it's not as bad as it might seem to reschedule a whole CLE. You know, essentially your first step for sure is cancel the catering, otherwise that's going to be some cost you can't get back. Notify registrants, put them on standby, you know, hold on, we'll reschedule as fast as we can. You're going to notify your venue and secure backup dates from them immediately. By the way, all of this is happening in, I'd say collectively from the first bullet to the second to last bullet, this should happen in 30 seconds, I advise, or less. That's a joke. You want to notify your faculty and confirm the new date as soon as possible. I found that for that, it's very helpful to have their phone numbers, which for previous CLEs I hadn't acquired. I was just kind of doing everything by email. But man, was it great to be able to just call people and say, we have to cancel tomorrow's event. Are you free for next week on this time or whatever? And that was a much faster way to move through it. You will need to update all the registrants once you have your new date. Don't forget to update all of your advertisements. So get back with Chris, get back with Maureen, go on your LinkedIn page and Facebook page and anywhere else you posted advertisements and make sure those are updated, otherwise everyone's just going to have no clue what's going on. A sidebar, a silver lining to having a rescheduled CLE is sometimes you can take on extra people because they'll take advantage of the new window of time to register. But the other problem is you'll lose people, obviously, because then they can't come, so it kind of comes out in the wash. You'll have to update your course materials, your CLE verification forms, and finally, don't forget to order the food again, because people will be very angry, notwithstanding the miracle of rescheduling the CLE, if they show up and there's no Diet Coke. Diet Coke is a must, because there's caffeine in there and it has no fat. And so on and so forth. So don't forget that last part. Having completed all that in 30 seconds or less, you're done. You've rescheduled your CLE and you can move on to executing the CLE, which is the next slide. So the day of the CLE can be a whirlwind, but it's by far the most fun. You will wear many hats that day. You'll have to come a few hours early to set up the room, AV stuff, food, excuse me, placards for the presenters. You want to post signage to make sure that people know where to go once they get there. You'd be surprised. You know, we're at the law school, we're at this room, you know, I hope you can find your way there, and you get there and you look around and there's a bunch of people just like this, kind of just standing there, and they're like sheep that don't have a shepherd. So make sure you post signs so that people know, you know, that way to the room and so on and so forth. You'll want to be present at the registration table and be greeting registrants as they arrive, greeting certainly the CLE presenters as they arrive. Here's a pro tip on that. Look up their pictures if you haven't seen them in person before, because everybody looks like you know, an attorney who's there for a CLE if you don't know them better. So it's always nice to know the face of your presenters beforehand. You will be the MC for this entire event. So you'll be going up there, you're trying to get everybody excited and keep everything on pace. You're going to be the timekeeper, you're going to be tech support, hopefully with some help from the venue. Usually, we've been presenting at law schools, they always have some terrific IT people to help. You're going to be an event coordinator, you're going to be a photographer, hopefully you'll be posting some things to Instagram, or you're tweeting things and so on and so forth. You'll be gathering feedback from participants, and unfortunately, you're going to have to do all the cleanup at the end usually too. Every once in a while, there's a nice person that hangs back and helps, but don't expect that. So you will, have to roll up your sleeves at the end of it and clean everything up. And at the end, I guarantee you, you will be as tired as that little kitty in the last picture there. But it will have been worth it. It's going to be a blast, I promise. You're not done just quite yet. On the next slide, your day after the CLE task list is chief among them for sure. Send out your thank yous. Do a better job than that. But do send out your thank yous to your faculty. You should relay the feedback you've collected at the end. They really appreciate that. And I guess it's not par for the course for faculty to receive kind of the feedback after the fact, based on anecdotally what I've learned from them with their non-Virginia State Bar interactions. But when they do a CLE for the Immigrant Outreach Committee, they do actually get the feedback, and I compile it for them. I send it to them, and they're very thankful and appreciative of that. And the combination of the thank yous and actually keeping in touch with the feedback is a great way to retain people for future CLEs. You want to have your eye on the ball for what's next, for next year when you want to do an updated version, or when you want to do a different CLE with a new twist, but there'll be some overlap, and some of the people you've used in the past would be terrific people to present again. These are all reasons to make sure you kind of keep in touch and keep the connections alive, and convey how appreciative you are. You will want to make sure you mail any checks into the Virginia State Bar if you haven't yet done so. Typically, you can do that kind of in batches as they come in. You can also kind of wait closer to the CLE and then just send them all in together. But either way, you want to make sure you forward those in so that the bar can cash them. Don't forget to apply for reimbursement. As Maureen mentioned earlier, a lot of the stuff the bar can't pay for up front, although I guess you can use a credit card, right, Maureen, from the bar. You can also use your own credit card, which I find easier, so long as, of course, you ask for the money back at the end. And there's, I believe, tab, is it 11? There's a reimbursement form. So you want to keep all of your original receipts, fill out that form, send the original receipts in the form to either Maureen or Catherine, I can't remember which of the two, probably either one is fine. Finally, you want to report your success to the YLC. Just send your YLC board liaison an update, tell them how terrific it was, how many people showed up, the feedback you received from participants and from the presenters as appropriate, and if you can, send a picture or two, and if you pulled in any registration fees, give them an update, give them an accounting sort of, and that's it. That's the end of the presentation. I got one more slide, which is just to open it up for questions, but I do want to just emphasize again, this is truly one of the most rewarding and fulfilling ways to volunteer I have found. I've just had such a terrific time serving this role, and I'm confident that for all of you who are starting this year, you will find it as fulfilling and as fun and rewarding as I have. Your YLC board liaison is going to be very helpful throughout the process, so don't worry about leaning on them or asking them dumb questions. There's no such thing. So do reach out to them. Feel free to contact me. My information is in there with the rest of the program chairs, and just have fun with it. So that's it. I don't know if I have time for questions.
I think what we'll do is, if you have questions for Gio, we'll do those when we do the breakout sessions. And if you're not in the breakout session with Gio, you can ask me, because we'll be in different breakout sessions. So.
All right, thank you.
Gio, a round of applause.
Thank you.